All right, welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about a little bit of the differences between you getting into comic books or getting into manga, and why it is easier to stick with manga rather than comic books. I've heard the the very interesting description of people saying, "Oh, it's hard to get into comic books." Why do people have this kind of impression when you clearly can just pick up any manga and just start, right? But why is that? And it's not much a matter of difficulty of access for the comic books, but rather a difference in structure between the both. So, what we're going to talk about are these differences between these two, and why is it so much more complicated to uh, not only kind of getting into comic books, but more sticking to it in opposition to manga. I'm not gonna explain what one or the other is in this video, maybe in another video, but right now we're gonna talk about these structural differences. All right. So a comic book has a very particular way of working, right? So the comic book has a kind of a strange uh, basis to it, right? Because a comic book is not just an idea that someone had and then it goes out and then boom, it works. Not anymore. It used to be like that when they started it, probably, but it is not like that today. Because in order for you to have a comic book of a certain character, at least, you have a whole company behind it. But not just a simple company, but a multi layered company. So let's take the two most known big companies of comic books, which is DC Comics and Marvel Comics. So Marvel is the company that publishes them, but there is another company that owns Marvel, which is Disney. The same thing with DC Comics. DC Comics is not just DC Comics, but it is owned by Warner Brothers. So these comics, they need to bow down to whatever agenda the bigger company tells them to follow. So this is the first problem. Yeah. The manga, on the other hand, has a more simplistic way because it's just one company, basically. Like let's say the Shonen Jump that publishes the serialization of the manga. And manga has an advantage over comics because you can literally just self-publish. It doesn't mean that you cannot self-publish your comic books. You can, but there is virtually no way of you just easing your way into one of the big companies with your self-published comic books. right? Unless the company literally just look at you and be like, okay, this aligns with our agenda, so we're gonna yoink and just put you in there. The moment that happens, a lot of things will change in the comic books that you created. But in manga, the moment that the guy creates his doujin or doujin, which is a self-publishing manga, comes in the company, grabs your manga, and you will work for the company on your manga, right? You will have to continue on and serialize and eventually finish your story, right? That's basically how it works. But here's the problem. And here comes the difference in how hard it is for you to stick with comic books and how easier it is to stick with manga. And that is exactly this, the fact that once your story is within those companies, let's say Marvel or DC, your story will be passed to other hands. So every time you open, you get an issue. Let's say you get your Spider-Man #1, and your Spider-Man #1 has a writer and a artist that works on it, right? And let's say that this artist is one guy. It's one guy who writes and one guy who makes the art. And he goes on for a while being the same guy. But let's say issue #5, they change it because then it's not going to be the same artist anymore. It's going to be another artist. Sometimes you get the same writer and different artist doing the art of the issue. And then you're reading it and you're going to notice it. The difference sometimes is grotesque. The difference is telling on the art that you're looking at. But then the problem goes on because at issue 10, it's not the same writer because you start noticing that your character, your Spider-Man, is not acting like he was acting on the first 9 issues, and all of a sudden he's acting differently, and you're going to look, it is a different writer. You're going to be lucky if you have one specific artist, and one specific writer to write a whole arc for your character. You're going to be lucky, right? Because sometimes you have differences in writers and artists from issue to issue. So you're going to have like 3 different issues, like Spider-Man 12, 13, and 14. Each one of them will have a different writer and a different artist, and he's going to be completely everywhere. The tone is going to be everywhere. The pacing is going to be everywhere. The art is going to be everywhere. And you're going to start feeling a little bit, it's going to be discombobulated, okay? Now you flip to manga, and it's a different story because the manga artist, the mangaka, is just one guy. It's one guy who writes the story and the same guy who makes the art. Now I know you're gonna say, oh, but there is this and that specific manga that has a group of people. Yeah. And I'm not saying that the manga artist, he does absolutely everything alone. No, he doesn't. He has a team. But here's the difference. In a comic book, they try to make the team surrounding the character. So they will work on the character of the comic book. Meanwhile, the team in a mangaka is going to work for the mangaka, not whatever it is that they are working on. So uh, the team doesn't work for Goku, for example. They works for Akira Toriyama, who is the artist who creates Goku. That's the thing. So what you have then, in one side you have comic books that goes everywhere in art and storytelling, and then which creates inconsistency. And then you have manga, which has one person and creates a little bit more consistency. I'm not going to say that is 100% because we have mangas that go everywhere. Yeah, there's bad media everywhere, but there are good stuff, and the good stuff you're going to notice there is a certain level of consistency in them, but mostly in manga. But you see in comic books when they have a whole arc that is made by the same team, same writers, same artists, same directors, same editors, same everyone working in a whole arc, usually this arc is really great. And I'm going to give an example of one that I just read, which is The House of M for the X-Men. And the X-Men is a great example of how awful, it's disgusting how bad it is when you keep changing artists and writers. The pacing is terrible, the characterization is terrible, the art is disgusting. And I'm talking specifically about the new X-Men, when there's a whole conflict with Cassandra, which is Xavier's sister, who he tried to murder in the womb. The pacing in that thing is so bad. Is so bad. Things just happen. There's no build up, and there is a moment of a spoiler alert if you've never read that thing. But there is a moment in which Cassandra causes yet another Genosha genocide. She kills like millions of mutants in Genosha, which is the continent of mutants. It's all in like 2 pages. A whole genocide is made in 2 pages. That alone is just bad. Oh no, but you have to read this other comic and this other comic and this other comic to understand, to really see what happened. This one is just to show that. No, no. It's just not good. Because the House of M works. It shows everything that you need to know and you need to see the story working, and everything works well, and you can see the impact of everything in every character. And then you can, of course, go and read their specific House of M comic book separately of the characters that are involved in there. Like, for example, Spider-Man House of M. You can read I think there's an Avengers House of M. There's Wolverine House of M. There's a whole separate thing, right? You can read the point of view of other characters in there, but when you see the main thing, everything that you need to know is there. Everything that happened is there. It's well paced, it's well made, it's well written, and it's understandable. You understand everything that happens within the story. But then you go to see the new X-Men, and there's this whole story and things just don't work. And you read one issue is written by one person and drawn by one person, and then the next one is written by another person and drawn by another person, and then the third one is written by yet another third person, and sometimes they use the same artist, and then they go back to the previous artist on the first one. It's not good. There's no consistency, and the art is just ugly. It just doesn't keep up. But then you go to manga, and there is a chance for the manga to actually get the art growing better over time, because it's the same artist making the art. It's just one person. Yeah, he has a team that helps him and all that, but he is the one who makes the art. There's just one guy. If there is one guy making the art, like I said, there is a high chance that the art actually grows better over time. And you can see it in series that are way high longer extended period, right? Like Dragon Ball. You see the very distinct difference between the art in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And from Dragon Ball Z, it gets different each arc. It gets a little bit better until we finish with the art in Dragon Ball, the Buu saga. All right? You see the difference in art, and the art gets better over time. All right? Why? Because it's the same guy. It's the same thing with One Piece. If you pick up the first volume of One Piece and the most recent one, you're going to see a very, very distinct difference between the arts. It gets a little bit better. In this case, I would say it gets a lot better because it's way longer than anything that ever existed in manga. So the problem with comic books is not just like the meme in the thumbnail. How do you get into comic books? You don't. There is no entryway, right? Oh no, you shouldn't read the Batman #1 because it's like 1940 blah blah blah, and people are gonna be like, hey, it's gonna have the problems of the time. Now shut the fuck up, okay? It's just because there's no consistency. There's no consistency. The Batman will change every single time, right? And here's another here's another big problem about comic books is the fact that they just don't end the story. They don't tell the story and end it. In manga, usually, I just gave two examples that stories just never end because they just don't want to stop milking that cow, which is Dragon Ball and One Piece. It would just last until the art. Well, Dragon Ball lasted until Toriyama died, but we still have Oda to make more One Piece. We'll see when he's gonna end, if it ever gonna end, right? But there are stories that end. Actually, the majority of stories there aren't necessarily shonen, action packed. They usually end. It's a story. A story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Every story has to have that. But the problem with comic books is that they want the story to never end. So the characters never get old. The characters never die. If a character dies in a comic book, boy oh boy, I guarantee you they're not gonna be dead forever. Something's gonna happen, and they're gonna go come back to life. Batman died a number of times. Superman died a number of times. Spider-Man died, I think, twice or three times, a couple of times. Captain America died a couple of times. It, it gets complicated. How do you stick with it? Because there are no stakes in the story, right? There are literal no stakes in the story unless it is very stated in the comic book that you're reading that is a, oh no, it's some story of what if, it's some sort of another dimension or another world. Oh no, that happened in Earth 6969, and is actually this is not Earth 6969, this is Earth 6767, and that's bad, you know. And there is a lot of problems with blackwashing the characters, changing the characters, uh, woman washing the characters, just turning the character into a woman or whatever. I personally don't care, because so long as the character is someone else, like they did with Miles Morales and Spider-Man, he's another dude. He's another dude. Okay? It's a completely not a dude who suffered the same thing that Peter Parker suffered. But he's a completely another different guy with different powers and all of that. He's just Spider-Man, right? But he's Miles Morales. He's different. And the problem is not that he's black, whatever. The problem is that you have to make him another person. Just keep going on. You don't have to bring Peter Parker back. You don't. But no, they have to. They have to. They have to bring him back. So a character can't stay dead forever. Uh, it's fine if you want if you want Batman to exist, but let Bruce Wayne die. This is why things like animated series usually are okay. I'm gonna say okay. They're not good or great. They are okay. They are passable because they are confined stories that have an ending. It may be an open ending, but it's still an ending. Yeah? Like, as the image here says, the Batman animated series. But one great story is Batman Beyond. Because then it's not Bruce Wayne. Of course, in the animated series, if you've never watched it, another spoiler to you, it is stated that the guy is actually Bruce Wayne's clone. Yeah. It didn't have to be. It didn't have to be at all. Just make it a normal another dude. Like Spider-Man 2099, which is Miguel O'Hara. It's a completely different dude. It has nothing to do with Peter Parker. And it's great. The story is great. The comic book is okay, but the story is interesting because it's another dude. Just make another dude. But you can't, right? You can't do it. You just can't do it. So having the problem of comic books needing to have different writers and different artists to make the thing, because each one wants to tell a story of Batman and each one has an idea. And there's even a bigger problem, the multi-layered problem of the agenda of the bigger company. Like Disney has an agenda that they receive, and they have to pass it down to Marvel, and Marvel has to pass it down to the characters. So all the writers and artists has to they have to transmit the message no matter what. So you got horrible things like I don't remember her name. It's the black chick that is the replacement for Iron Man. But at the same time, you can't let Iron Man die, so you're gonna have to have them both exist at the same time. Because of whatever agenda they have to pass down. And that you start seeing characters acting out of character because the character that you knew was written by someone else. They worked on another type of agenda. And now they're all of a sudden they're gay, or they're gonna become a troon or whatever. And boom, you have a different character. It's a completely different character, out of character, and it's just disgusting. Sometimes it's in a whole arc. I'm gonna take an example of how bad the difference in writers cause, even in an animated series. I rewatched recently the X. It's a show from my childhood, and I had decided to rewatch it to know how it ended for real, because I remember seeing the ending, but I was like, wait, is this the end? Is this really the end? So I had to come back and rewatch it. So I came back recently, just I think it was like last week. I finished it. I finished rewatching it, and the first season is so well paced, so well written. It's so interesting. It has the presentation. Each episode is a character that shows up. Each episode is a different type of conflict that they have to solve, and it's always kind of tight needed. It's kind of a social thing in which they are trying to hide that they are mutants and all that, and what will happen if everybody knows that we are mutants and blah blah blah. And then the season ends, they fight Magneto, of course, because of course they do. And they win, of course they win, because they are the X-Men. And in the very next episode, which is the beginning of season 2, is already another writer. The first season was written by one guy, just one guy. One guy wrote the whole first season. And then they started doing the normal thing of each episode is a different guy writing it. And it shows. It really shows. Because then, in halfway through season 2, it starts to decline. Characters just stop growing. All the growth that you get in season 1 is just out a window, ended completely off. The worst of it all is the whole conflict between Nightcrawler and Mystique, because in this particular animated series, she is his mother, biological mother, and she is Rogue's adopted mother. Even though she left her with the blind girl, with the blind owl, she was the guardian on paper. And Kurt, in the animated series, being a teenager, he's all like, "Oh, it's my mother. Oh no, she's a bitch, but she's my mother," and all that. And at a certain point, Mystique sacrifices herself and becomes a statue of stone. And he's there like trying to help Mystique because he's like, okay, I know she did horrible things, but she's my mother. And he tries to have Rogue into it, and Rogue is like, nah, fuck this bitch. To a point that Rogue pushes her down a cliff and breaks the statue. That scarred Nightcrawler so much that he refused to talk to Rogue for like one episode. And then the other writers seem to have never watched it, and they had to finish the thing in 2 episodes. And then they bring Mystique back as one of the Apocalypse horsemen. And then when they recover everyone, they heal everyone. Mystique is there again. And when she's like, oh, wait, let's talk about it. Kurt is the one to snap to her. He snapped at her. He's like, ah, fuck you, because the way everything you did it. And I was like, what? No. Bitch, literally a couple of episodes ago, you were absolutely scarred because Rogue pushed her off a cliff and broke her statue. That everybody was like, she's still in here. She's still in here. But there is no way to help her out of this. The only one who could help was Rogue. Rogue would have to absorb a little bit of her power to kind of kicks in her mutation back, and she would revert back into a normal living person, mutant. And then Rogue was like, nah, fuck you. He saw his mother being broken into pieces. And the first thing that he says to her when she comes back, and she bags him, she's like, oh, wait, no, wait, I'm sorry for everything that I did. She says that, and he snaps at her. That is not just a problem with the animation. That is a problem within the comics. Going back to the new X-Men, there is a disease going on within the mutants. Everyone is sick. And Hank McCoy goes ahead and he finds out what it is. He finds out that there's just a bunch of nano sentinels inside of the blood of everyone, and they are killing everyone from within. He tries to say it like 5 times. Hey guys, there's nano sentinels. They're killing us. I found out. Nobody paid attention. Hey guys, there's nano sentinels. They're killing us. And then Jean Grey one time, I'm sick here. Oh my gosh, my head hurts. Hank, what the hell is going on? And he repeats himself yet again. The same thing. I had to quit. There's no way. There's just no way. Why? Because in the course of this happening, it was like 3 or 4 writers and 2 or 3 artists, and the art was awful. The art never got better at all, ever. Do you understand? So it's not a problem to get into comics. It's a problem to stick with comics because of the structure of how it is made. And like I said, you would get lucky if you get a whole arc. So 3-5 issues of the same team working on it. Same writer, same artist. You will get lucky if you have that. But then you go to manga. And then in manga, you have one dude or one dudette working on the art and the story. They do it all. They have to do it all. But it's their story. They want to tell the story. They write the story. They make the art. They have a team supporting them doing the art. Of course, They also have the problem of the message that whatever the company wants the message to be passed down. Yeah, that happens in manga as well. Maybe in a more subtle way, which used to be back in the day for comic books. All messages were used to be more subtle for comic books. Nowadays, it's just on your face all the time. But for manga, it's still a little bit subtle. It's starting to become on your face, but it used to be more subtle. It's more subtle than in the comics. But in the manga, the artist has an idea, he has the story or she has the story, and then they work on it. Usually the story has an ending. And I'm going to give an example of one of the greatest stories, one of the greatest shonen action stories of the last 20 years. No, 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 20 plus, probably the last 30 years or so, right? I don't remember when Dragon Ball came up, but one of the best, which is Kimetsu no Yaiba, uh, Demon Slayer. So Demon Slayer has an ending. It has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. It's over. The story is over. So the author, as far as we know, it's a girl. The lady wrote down the story. She made the art. She made the story, and she ended it. And that's it. The story's done. Right? We have the same thing with things that has a longer continuity, but a probable ending, which is Bleach, has a probable ending. But let's take something that is a shorter story, like Alita Battle Angel. You have the story of this robot girl, and she fights, and that's it. There's an ending to the story. Ghost in a Shell has an ending to the story. Trigun has an ending to the story. And they usually use things that are, most of the time, the majority of the time, they use uh, too much of kind of silly philosophies like Nietzsche and that kind of stuff. Even sometimes Darwinism and whatnot, just to tell a story, just to tell a cool story. And that's all they try to do, that just tell a cool story. Sometimes they try to be overly edgy, but that's all they do. They try to tell a cool story in their wacky way. And that's it. And it's just like the meme in a thumbnail. How do you start reading a manga? Yeah, you start by number one. Oh, I wanna read One Piece. When do I start? Number one. You're gonna have all the bases in the first few volumes, and that's it. Of course, you can have people tell you which are the better arcs for the story because reasons or whatever reason they have. Some, depending on the stories, some are objectively better, yes, but depends on the story. And if you have a a manga that has like 20 volumes, that's it. There are stories that they are just good from beginning to end. They're just stories that are just okay in the beginning, and they get good in the middle, and then they just fall off, like Dragon Ball, for example. It started as one type of story, Dragon Ball, which is an adventure. It's a whole adventure, and then it gets kind of good in the middle, Dragon Ball Z, and then it began to fall off with Dragon Ball Super. But Dragon Ball Super, it's already a continuation. It's beyond the creator. But there it is. It still exists. So, and he signed it off. He kind of passed the torch. So they can just continue milking this cow for longer. So getting into manga, it's not that hard. You just have to pick a genre that you enjoy and just read it. Oh, I like action. Okay, what type of action? Because we have all sorts of action. Oh, I like medieval action. You're gonna have medieval action. Oh, I like superhero action. You have superhero action. Oh, I want fantasy stuff. You're gonna have fantasy stuff. I'm not saying that everything is amazing, everything is incredible storytelling. Of course not. But the chances of you getting into a manga is higher and easier than for you to get into comic books. I just gave an example of one arc that was great to go through from the X-Men, which is the House of M. And once it's over, it's over. How do you continue? Well, you have to read the next arc, and good luck. Good luck. Because it's not going to be easy. So that's the difference between these two. It's not necessarily to bash on one or the other, even though I did bash on comic books way more, but I can bash on manga easily because how the hell do you get into, let's say, Fate? You don't. How do you get into what's that? Redo, ReZero. I think it's ReZero. The goddamn, it's disgusting. You don't. You just don't. Some manga, you just walk away from them. Unless you're really, oh no, I really want to go into this weird thing and I want to read everything. There you go. It's a whole rabbit hole. But there is one thing. Even those, even Fate, and even uh, ReZero, they're basically made by the same person. So there will be a semblance of continuity in there. There will be, differently from a comic book. So the chances are that your character from those stories, in the Fate story, in the ReZero stories, your character is gonna actually act the same way overall, unless they suffer the change. But you will see the change as you go through the story. And that change will stick. It will not just go back and return to what it was. But getting into those stories, ooh, good luck. Good luck. It's not. It's not that easy. It's overly complicated, and it spans with light novels and everything else. It's a whole rabbit hole. So there are things that are hard to get into in manga, yes. But if you choose a genre and you find a title, how do you start? Number one. When you choose your favorite superhero, oh, I like this superhero. How do I read it? Oh, there's no way to know. Thank you very much. Goodbye.